Hi, I'm Shadia Martini. I'm running for State Senate District 7. And we're here today with Scott. I met Scott at the City Council meeting in Southfield, and he went up and made a comment about voting and voting rights that really registered with me. And after the council meeting, I went out and talked to him and asked him if we could just sit and chat about this because I was very impressed with his comment and the numbers. And apparently Scott is an engineer, so he's always data driven. How are
Yes,
you, Scott?
I'm very good. I'm glad to do this with you.
Thank you so much. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in this?
Well, as you mentioned, I was a former engineer. I've retired, and when I retired, I got very involved in voter registrations and helping to change the Constitution in Michigan to enable people to vote by working through with the ACLU. So I'm a kind of a voter activist.
So, you worked on Proposal 3, I
Proposal
understand.
3 in
Yeah.
2018 was a major effort, and headed up a team of people who were out collecting the signatures to get everything on the ballot. It's really expensive to bring referendums or proposals onto our ballots to vote on. It's usually millions of dollars.
And not only expensive, but a lot of work. A lot of activists are putting in the time and effort to
Yeah.
get all these signatures.
Yes. In my case, we had a team of anywhere from 20 to 50 people out on the streets collecting signatures. I think we've all run into people saying, sign my paper. But they've also hire people, because of the time crunch to get 750, you have to have at least 500,000 signatures. Because of that time crunch, they usually hire people also, and that's where all the money is spent.
Is it like 6 months?
It's shorter than that.
Yeah. So you have to collect all the signatures and then they have to be vetted because
That's right.
sometimes if anything is wrong, they'll just throw out that specific name, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So you always have to collect more to be able to get to the correct number.
That's right. And they don't look at every signature. They do a statistical analysis of it. They take blocks and blocks and blocks, and then they look at those, and that's how they certify.
So in Michigan in 2018 and in 2022, we expanded voting rights.
We have one of the best voting ecosystems.
Yeah, I mean, we have early voting, we have
no exit.
permanent absentee ballot and no reason absentee
That's right.
voting. It's it's amazing when you allow people the ability to vote that they will participate more in democracy. And without participation, democracy is not as strong.
And in the work I've done in registering people, especially down in Detroit, in Highland Park, there's this one person I'm drawing up in my mind right now, where it doesn't take much to stop people from voting. That we brought stamps because they had to mail in the form at that time to get onto the registration or the absentee, the absentee ballot. And that 75-cent, it was at the time, 75-cent stamp was a barrier for these folks in Highland Park in this senior center that I was at. They took that stamp right now because they didn't have it.
It's amazing how some people think that what is 75 cents, right?
Yeah, right.
What is paying $100 plus to get a passport? What is leaving your job,
Right.
leaving work early because you're barely making ends meet.
Right.
You're working sometimes 2 and 3 jobs to put food on the table.
Right.
And then we're asking these people to go a step further to vote.
Right. I had one case where I got an emergency call I was working with the ACLU at the time, and they said, there's a lady who needs to have a form for registration, I think it was. And she was down in the city. And I went over there and she called me. She was on the bus taking her kid to the doctor. And, she just didn't have a car. She couldn't get the form. And so I just left it in her door so that she could have it. So the situations of people who desperately want to vote, but they need the help too sometimes. And it doesn't take much, and that it all falls apart and they can't.
And you look at low income areas where you have lines. So people have to wait for hours. You go to more affluent areas and you go in and out.
Right.
In 5 minutes, you're done.
Right.
It is unmistakably true that we are putting barriers for low-income people.
Right.
And people of color.
That's right.
And African Americans. And, to prevent them from voting.
Yes.
And this is not a democracy.
That's right. And those barriers are being thrown up by people who aren't part of that activity or that strata of society.
So there is this proposal that is going to be on the ballot in 2026 because they already have the signatures, and it is about voting. So can you tell us more about this?
Yes, it's a proposal to, I called it at the council meeting, it's a trap. They put this veneer over it that says that we only want citizens to vote. Well, of course, we only want citizens to vote, but we want to have proof that that everybody is a citizen. And I've been thinking about it kind of like, when you see those movies of people in New York City and they've got 4 locks on their door and they have to unlock all of them. And well, there's a reason for that, because people are getting broken into. And then you go out into the rural areas and people don't even have a lock on the door. They leave them open all the time. Why do they do that? Because it's easy to get in and out and they don't have a problem. Well, in our situation in this country, everybody knows they need to be a citizen to vote. And if somebody tries to vote who's not a citizen, they're breaking 2 felony laws, and they could go to jail for 9 years just to try and vote. And if they're non-citizens, and they could be deported. So the barriers to that situation are so high that it almost never happens unless somebody makes a mistake or it's just by an accident. And statistically, it's like 0. So it's not a problem. And yet this referendum is like putting 4 locks on the door, trying to prevent something that's really not going to happen. And yet it does keep out other people who would like to vote, because now you've added these barriers to voting.
Yeah, I mean, look what's happening today with ICE. Just the presence of ICE in communities like Pontiac, for example, which has a large community of Hispanics. There are people who are legal. They're not illegal. They are legal. They have papers and everything.
Right.
But because of the way they look, they're not leaving their home. They're not going to work.
Right.
They're not going to buy groceries.
Right.
Just because they're scared that they would be stopped by ICE and they wouldn't get a chance to show the papers.
Right.
Now tell me that these same people are going to go and break the law to vote.
That's not going to happen. And what they're going to require people to do is to show up with their passport or prove they were born in America with their birth certificate. And for a certain strata of society, they are like, the numbers I was quoting at the council is like 20% of those people who earn under $50,000 a year don't have a passport. So that's not available to them. Whereas someone who is more affluent has a passport, and they can easily show that. So those folks who have their passports, they say, well, just show up with your passport. They don't have it, and it costs $100 or $100.
Over, yeah.
And so it's a if you can't afford a 75-cent stamp, a $100 bill is.
Or you don't have a car. So now it's another hurdle. We're putting more and more and more hurdles in front of people to vote. So when I go to vote, I show my driver's license, and they usually compare my name to a list that they have of registered voters.
Yes.
So this is already happening. So if you're not on the list of registered voters, you're not going to be able to vote unless you signed an affidavit.
That's right.
So most people, for whatever reason, think that you don't have to show ID, which is not true. We show ID. And second, that there is already a list of all these names. It's not like, they see your ID and you're done. So some people say, well, there are people who are illegal who can get driver's license, and that's true in certain states. But then your name is not on the registered voter list.
That's right.
So where is the problem?
There isn't one, and that's why it doesn't show up. When they do all these studies and fraud and all, it doesn't happen. The only way that you could actually, throw your ballot into the machine is if you sign I forget what it's called, but it's
that little thing.
It's affidavit.
Yeah.
And say, that you're should be voting. And then that is then segregated out and held aside as a provisional ballot. So it's not even counted as like the normal ballots. And again, there's these checks and balances through the system that that it's prevented from happening. So it's a non-issue.
So we're building a society where we have like a caste system. Those who have and are able are going to vote, and the have-nots and the disabled or unable are going to find it harder to vote.
That's right. And so we don't, for me, being a voter activist, I'm very interested in everybody's voice being heard. And so that we can incorporate all of that in the policies and laws that the country adopts. And the only way that those people get heard is by voting, because politicians don't pay attention to people who don't vote.
Yeah, you don't have a voice. So, I grew up under dictatorship. And the first time I really voted was here in this country after I became a citizen. And the way I grew up in Syria under the dictatorship of Assad, the father, not the son. I lived under the father. When we voted, we would go to the polling station and they gave us a piece of paper with picture of dear leader in the center. And there was a yes or a no. And you had 5, 6, 7 security service all around you. So you didn't have the privacy of a booth. No, they were looking over your shoulder to see what you're going to check.
Right.
So you know what happened to those who checked no.
Right.
They disappeared and never to be heard from ever again.
Right.
And sometimes they used to give us pins to prick our fingers and vote with our blood. This is how I lived. This is our background.
Right.
And when I see people taking voting for granted, it hurts. It hurts me to think that this thing that people in other countries kill and die to get, like in 2011, a revolution started in Syria. More than half the population was displaced. More than half. Like we're talking 22 million people. There were like 14 million people that were either internally displaced or refugeed in other countries.
Right.
All this to achieve democracy.
Right.
All this to be able to vote.
Right.
And yet,
so you have a voice.
We take voting for granted. I never had a voice. People don't know what they don't know. And I always try to explain to people by telling them stories from my past, from how I lived when I was a teenager, because I lived through an uprising. And I try to explain to them how bad it can get, that it can happen anywhere, that we cannot take our democracy for granted. We cannot take voting for granted.
I work with another activist. His name is Charles Thomas. And Charles Thomas has 2 aunts who were 14 and 16 when they were part of the Selma marches in the mid-60s.
Yeah.
They participated in all 3 marches. And now in their 70s, they're still activists. They'll be here in Southfield. And they speak to young people and they're telling them, you have to vote, because they're trying to draw you back to what we lived when we were kids. They were in segregated schools. They couldn't ride the buses. They lived through the entire 1960s civil rights movements that tried to get people back, get all their rights, and to be able to live their lives with freedom. They're doing the same thing you're talking about. They're trying to talk to their communities and say, this is where this is going if you don't get out and vote.
And that's what happens when you have the freedoms, when you have the ability. You don't think how it can be without what you have now.
Well, you can see it right now, what they're doing with the new Supreme Court rulings. And they're eliminating the black districts, the only black districts that were in Alabama and I think Mississippi right now. It is going backwards.
I think Louisiana was the one.
Yes, that was what the court case was about.
Yeah, and representation matters. It really matters, because if you are not at the table, you're on the menu. Your point of view, your perspective is not being discussed. So when you're not there, they're making decisions for you.
Right.
That sometimes don't work for your community.
Right. And the rich and powerful are very focused on this. And so back to the referendum. That referendum that's on the ballot, they're going to be on the ballot in November, was financed by a multi-billionaire, the CEO for Uline. One guy financed that entire signature collection effort. And he's doing that. He lives in Illinois. So he's trying to keep Michigan voters from voting who are in that lower economic strata. And it's voter suppression, pure and simple.
Because we're such a purple state.
Right.
So if he does this in Illinois, it's not going to matter,
Right.
but he wants to do it here. And we
Right.
know very well that if you are one of those very rich people, you're not going to spend money if you're not thinking about the outcome.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, and talking about illegals voting and what's happening today with ICE grabbing people off the street. And I was in a meeting in Birmingham and they brought a lady from Samaritas. So Samaritas is the Lutheran, what's it called? Not organization, but they work with refugees. I heard about Samaritas because I worked with refugees for years. And they are the organization that is responsible for bringing refugees in Michigan, in our area here, because in other areas like in Ann Arbor, there's the Jewish Family Services that brings refugees. So here area, it's Samaritas. And Samaritas deals with legal. So legal refugees, legal immigrants, but legal is the most important part of it. And that lady was saying that since ICE came to Michigan, they haven't been able to do anything else because the people they work with, again, these people are legal. They're having so many issues. Many of them are being grabbed off the street. So when people think that, oh, well, ICE is here, they're grabbing criminal, illegal, 70% are not criminal, and many of them are legal. So
some of them are citizens.
Yeah, some are citizens. And again, I go back to my past where in 1980, I had two cousins that were grabbed off the street. One was 17, one was only 14 years old. And this was in the middle of the uprising. So the uprising took place between 1979 and 1982. And in 1980, these two cousins of mine disappeared. And it's very difficult to find any information because it's dangerous. If you ask about them and they are with the regime, you're suspect too.
Right.
So they spent 20 years in prison. 20 years. They were tortured viciously. And these two young kids, really kids, were released in the year 2000 because Assad's father died and Assad's son took over. So the Syrian constitution was changed in 5 minutes because it said you had to be 40 years to become a president, and he was 34.
Okay.
So that was easy. They changed it from 40 to 34 and we're done.
Right.
And so the Assad's son became the president of Syria, and because he was so magnanimous, he declared amnesty and they let some people out of jail. My cousins were some of those people who were lucky. I don't know about lucky, but they, I wasn't in Syria back then, but my parents told me that they left prison completely broken.
Yeah.
The 14-year-old was mentally gone. The 17-year-old, he was only 2 years older than me, and we used to play together when we were younger. He didn't last more than a few years after he was released. But the worst thing is the crime. Why were these two kids thrown in jail for 20 years? It was because they enrolled in a karate class in the middle of the uprising in 1980. And that made them suspicious in the eyes of somebody in, Secret Service.
Right. Right.
And, out of terrorizing the population.
Right.
We go back to terrorizing the population, grabbing people off the street.
Right.
And now I'm seeing this happen here.
Right.
And people don't understand that this is what happens under authoritarian regime.
Right. There's no check and balance. There's nothing to stop. Whatever they want to do, they do.
And without due process, without telling them who they are. Like if you're walking down the street and somebody with a mask attacked you, what are you going to do? You're going to defend yourself, right? And now what happened? You're resisting arrest,
right?
And it becomes worse for you.
Right.
It is set up as a trap.
Yes.
For people who only look like they are supposedly not legal in this country, and mostly Hispanic. So if you can tell us more about your comment at the city council, like the numbers that
Sure.
if you have them with you.
I do.
Because I thought it was very, very interesting.
Yeah, it was, to me, it's all, I was trying to indicate to the council, this was set up, this referendum or proposal is set up to filter out from the voting population people who are on the lower echelons of our society or the more financially disadvantaged. And so that's where I looked up only 20% of Americans earning under $50,000 have a passport. And that came from an organization called YouGov and the publication called The Economist. And that the latest US Census Bureau estimates in Southfield was that we only earn $41,000 per capita. So this would include a large part of Southfield, which is where we're at right now. And then 12% of people in that economic strata cannot find their birth certificates. And so for me, I can reach right in and grab it. I know exactly where it is in the next room. And that comes from the Bipartisan Policy Center. We're looking at the 12% of the people having to find their birth certificate or ordering it, spending money, going through all of that hassle while they're trying to just live their lives in order to do something that they could normally vote. So that's part of where that comes from. And then that part about, as I was saying before, the gentleman who is trying to keep those people from voting. It's one guy. And that comes from, I found that out by looking up, well, who paid for this? And it came from the getting the referendum, and it comes from Americans for Citizens Voting. So I said, well, who's financing them? And that's coming from an organization called Restoration of America. And I looked up who's financing Restoration of America. And that's when I found out that 94% of their budget comes from one man, that's CEO of Uline. And he put up its multi-millions of dollars in order to make this happen. And so, he's in Illinois, as you pointed out before. It's a blue state, but he's trying to national politics, and Michigan is a linchpin, a state for what happens in the country. So that's why we get so much attention from so many different organizations from outside of Michigan to trying to tell us how to vote.
Don't Republicans excel at misnomers?
Yes.
Like
yes.
Right to Work,
yeah.
for
right.
example.
Or SAVE Act.
Or SAVE Act, or pro-life.
Right. I want to point out one other thing about this that there's a key part of this referendum. It's not only for the individuals, but it's asking the Secretary of State is mandated, if this passes, it's mandated to conduct a statewide audit to verify citizenship of every person currently on the voter. And I'm not sure how the Secretary of State's going to do that, if they're going to look up who's got a passport, who doesn't, or things like that. But if they can't find any verification through databases, then those people would be notified and given 45 days to prove that they are eligible voters, that they are citizens. So everybody in the state will be interrogated by this.
Would be suspect.
Will be suspect. And then they'll get a notice and they'll say, hey, we couldn't find any documentation. Can you present that? So show us your paper. Kind of the thing that causes most people's skin to crawl.
So spending all this money and time and effort to solve a problem that doesn't exist.
That's right.
That's the bottom line, really.
It is.
Solving a problem that does not exist.
And it's a solution that has the advantage for other people that it keeps a lot of people away from they can't vote now.
And most importantly, lower income people.
That's right.
And people of color and women, because guess what these people vote.
That's right. And this guy's politics is that he wants just white rich people to control the country.
And I always think about history and how when you had this huge gap between very rich and very poor growing, what happened in the end? And I think about the short-sightedness of the very rich, thinking that, and the greed, like we want to get more and more and more and more money, pushing people into poverty. What's the end result of all this? Where are we going from here? Because history is clear where we go from here.
Well, if you needed any example of that thinking, it's in the climate. They are all about making money, and trying to protect the planet costs money, so they don't want to do it. And their short-sightedness is that they only care about themselves, in my opinion. And so they say, okay, well, I don't care about the grandkids or whoever when the planet is having such a mess from the climate change. And so they're very short-sighted. They only care about themselves. And they want to be, if they can control the votes so that people can't vote for to prevent climate change, well, then they get what they want.
And sowing doubt in
Doubt.
people's head. And the more research, scientific research that you
Mhm.
have, the worse for them. So what do? They defund all these research institutions,
Right.
all these universities that do research. They're defunded. They cancel all these programs. They prevent foreign students from coming to the US.
Yeah.
Those foreign students that are paying very high tuition so that our kids can go for lower tuition, and bringing, brains.
Right.
They call it the brain drain for a reason. I mean, we were attracting all these brains,
Right.
and now we're trying to get rid of brains because brains are
A threat. That's right.
to theories that are not based on scientific backing.
On reality.
So we get rid of the Department of Education, and the Department of Health is like, I think and I believe, instead of concrete evidence.
Can I ask you a question? What do you hope to do in the state Senate that would impact some of these things? Do you have ideas of what you would want to do?
I believe that I am bringing a different perspective to the table. My voice is very needed. I lived on 3 different continents. I lived under dictatorship. I lived in a socialist country. I lived in Europe where socialism is balanced. And I'm living here in the United States since 92. So I have life experiences that many people don't have and can't even fathom. And I have the educational background, the business expertise. So I'm bringing a lot to the table. And I believe in consensus building and in working together. But if you are going to come up with good ideas that are going to solve problems for people, you need a good group to brainstorm. And that group has to have the diversity in it.
Yeah.
And diversity is not just a color. It's not just national origin. It's not just gender, because, I'm the only woman in this race, and we're losing 8 women senators from 38 seats. We're losing 8 women senators. So there's so many variations of, when you want to brainstorm and bringing all these people from different backgrounds. But what I'm bringing is not there. In my opinion, it's very needed.
I agree with that.
And I'm a housing expert. So I've been, I'm an architectural engineer. I've been in construction and real estate for so long. I understand housing inside and out. And we have a very, very deep housing crisis, whether people are not able to buy homes, the price of land, zoning laws, urban planning, like the way we have all these areas connected to each other, but really without any public transportation.
Right.
So there is so much to be done there.
Yes.
And I look at how they're trying to solve the problem, and they're not going deep enough. So this is what I'm going to be bringing to the state Senate.
That's great.
And I'm not a politician. Like, I'm not a career politician. I have been a businesswoman for so long. I'm a mother. I love this country. It gave me everything. Most importantly, it gave me my voice back. And this is priceless. People don't understand how it to be voiceless. And people always think that immigrants come here just for economic reasons. And that is completely untrue. Both my parents were doctors. I lived a very good life in Syria, but I was always suffocating. You cannot express your opinion. You cannot, think. You cannot organize. You cannot assemble. You cannot, even most books were banned. It's suffocating. Just getting out of that environment, to me, was the best thing that ever happened. So I so appreciate this country. I so love this country, and I so love the people of this country, because really a country is not just organizations and institutions and government. It's the people.
Right.
And that's
all of the people.
All of the people. And that's the first thing that made me fall in love with this country. It's how kind people are. I mean, I'm not saying everybody's kind. Of course, we all know they're, obnoxious people and mean people and everything. The trend, the vast majority of people, even those who are believing all this nonsense, if their neighbor is in need, they will help their neighbor. It's, to me, public service is not optional. There is this debt of gratitude that I have to pay back to this country that gave me everything. My kids are grown. They're both doing very well. I'm 60 years old, and it's time for me to just step up and help.
Yeah, that's the way I felt when I retired.
Yeah, so you understand where I'm
I
coming
do.
from.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
And applaud it.
thank you so much for your time and for all the work that you do and volunteering with the ACLU. And, this is all very important work.
Thank you. I feel the same. It needs to happen, and we need to keep pushing hard because the other side is really pushing hard.
Yeah, true. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.